Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth and welcome to the Land Down Under Hangouts. Our book for this month is The House of Shattered Wings by Aliette de Bodard.
This is particularly dark as the cover goes. It doesn't show up at all.
Here, I've got the audio. We'll see if I can pull it up. Keep talking. I'll grab it.
Oh, I've got that too.
So the basic premise is that it is set in an alternate history Paris where angels exist and magic exists, and something is killing off members of one of the magical houses of Paris. So Kirsten, do you want to kick us off and tell us what you thought of it?
So to start with, I did the audio book version. I don't know. I was interested in the sort of the premise and I really liked the setting, but I kind of found the characters were not pulling me in. And I'm a very character-driven reader more than a plot-driven reader, and I felt this kind of had that sort of mystery-ish kind of plot as well, which is not usually my thing. So I did find, because I wasn't getting really engaged in a character, like I didn't find anyone that I was like really latching on to. I did find myself kind of zoning out, like, which doesn't tend to happen when I read a physical book, but in audio sometimes I'll be doing something while I'm listening and I'll be thinking, oh God, I don't think I listened for the last like 5 minutes. And that happened a lot in this book, more than it would normally happen in most books. So I did find it kind of hard to get into, I guess. So yeah, I didn't hate it. Like I didn't stop reading, and I got better with it towards the end, but it was mostly that I just didn't really care about any particular character that made it difficult for me. So yeah, sorry.
That's fine. All opinions valid. I think we'll go to Bobby next.
Okay. I didn't finish it. I chose not to finish it for actually quite a lot of the same reasons. So I liked the idea of the premise quite a lot, and bits and pieces that I was reading, like when we first started listening to it, because we were doing the audiobook together, I was very intrigued with this idea of the fallen and what was going on, and I was like, oh, this is dark. And I think part of it I was intrigued about was that I'm usually the one who picks a really dark, gruesome book for a book club, and I was like, whoa, this is something I probably would pick. But I did have trouble bonding with any particular character enough to kind of follow along with all the intrigue. Usually I really like mysteries, and I really like fantastical, often even like retellings of angel demon stories and things. I think just you were saying the whole court, the intrigue of court, because I wasn't interested in any one particular character enough to even figure out what pawn piece they were or chess piece they were, I did zone out a lot. And I even tried reading the ebook to see if that would help, and I still found the same thing. I just sort of, my eyes would glaze over as I was reading, which is very strange because the way it's written is very much my style. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the deal was.
David?
Sorry, I'm just having a hard time reading.
Would you like us to come back to you?
Possibly.
Okay.
Can we maybe come back to me?
Sure. Yep. Okay, so that leaves me, and I thought it was an interesting premise. There were some good bits and pieces about it. I kind of agreed on the characters a little bit. I also found the plot a bit muddy in places. Like it sometimes was difficult to follow what was going on, and like bits of the world building seemed maybe a little wobbly. So it was an okay book. Like it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. It was engaging enough, but it just didn't quite nail the execution, I think, for me.
I'm actually relieved to hear you say that some parts were like the plot was muddy, because I did wonder if that was my fault for tuning out. Like, because there was a lot of times where I was like, what's going on? I don't understand. Like at the beginning too, there were so many different characters, and I was like, which house is this person in again? And I wondered again if that was an audiobook thing, because with a physical book, I'll often flick back when I get to one of those spots where I'm like, hang on, who's this one again? And I flick back and go, oh yeah, that's that person, which I don't tend to do in audiobook. So I did wonder whether it was just me, but yeah, obviously not just me. That's good.
Well, I should also caveat that I read most of it yesterday and I was quite fatigued while doing so. So I'm not the most reliable person on that, but I do feel like it wasn't entirely clear. I think some of that was down to the characters, because some of their motivations were quite opaque. And I mean, that is fine, to other characters, but the reader needs to understand, I feel like, or at least have a good sort of guess. Whereas it wasn't always clear in this book, I think.
Yeah.
David, did you want to kick in and let us know what you thought?
Yeah. So I was listening to it with Bobby, and came to a very similar conclusion. I tried really, really hard to get into it. I thought the premise was kind of quite interesting, but it was really hard to empathize with the characters, to the point that I was really not caring at all if many of the members of the houses died in horrible ways. There was, which sounds really grotesque, but after a while, it's just like, well, you did kind of kidnap and bind this person who pretty much just wanted none of your drama or any of it on you. And now there's actually repercussions for this and you're blaming them for it, which was kind of the vibe I got. And I tried. When I was zoning out because we listened to the audiobook, I went back and listened to it again, trying to pick up the narrative and things like that. But a lot of it seemed to be court intrigue that sent me to sleep. But some of the more interesting bits, were actually just skipped over entirely. So maybe it was just a different focus than what I was used to. I really am actually intrigued to see what would have happened at the end, but it did seem to be pretty much laid out from reasonably early on as to exactly why there was something chasing people around. I don't know, I'd love to, I guess I'll find out pretty soon what actually happened at the end. So yeah, that was pretty much what I did. I think it could have been really, maybe it was just the way I was coming into it. Maybe if I'd actually read it on paper, then it might have been a lot easier for me to get through. But it was, yeah, the court, with not being able to empathize with the characters and the court intrigue being almost almost not really even driving the plot very much, was really made it quite hard to get through. I eventually also ran out of time, so there's only so many hours that I could listen, which is unfortunate. So yeah, slack for me, but yeah, I think it could have been more.
As you're talking there, it made me think it's got a bit in common with grimdark fantasy in a way. The houses is different factions and none of the characters are particularly likable, and there's kind of a bit of gothic horror, body horror stuff a little bit. So which is, yeah, definitely not my jam, and not really what I was expecting going in. It had a bit of the gothic horror as well, which I'm kind of a bit more behind, but yeah, not quite what I was expecting going in.
I thought you had even read it already, maybe, because when I was reading it and we were hitting those bits about taking apart the fallen because they were using them in rituals and stuff like that, I was like, you wouldn't read Mexican Gothic and it was nowhere near as body horror heavy as this is. What? I was really confused. But this explains it. You hadn't read it yet.
No, I hadn't read it yet. I've read some of the author's science fiction, which was excellent. Sorry?
This author, her science.
This author, yeah. She had I think it was a novella nominated for the Hugo Awards last year or the year before or something. It was called The Tea Master and the Detective, which is basically a riff on Sherlock Holmes, where the Watson character is like a living spaceship who is like an expert at mixing teas for like different medicinal effects and that sort of thing, and gets hired by this this woman to go out in space, in the void of space, to investigate what they think might be a murder. So I definitely recommend that one. It was excellent.
That sounded good.
Sci-fi then, see how that goes. Yeah.
So yeah, this was not what I was expecting. I'm not sure whether it was her debut novel. I think she might have had some stuff out before this one, although I'm not entirely sure.
She did. I just went and looked, but didn't look like it was anywhere near on the SFF area, in the same area. It looked more romancy, so maybe it was urban fantasy. I'm not sure, but you know, that it looked more romancy sort of stuff. So I don't feel like it was sort of that pure SFF type thing.
Okay, thanks, Mel. So yeah, I was a bit unclear about what time period it was set in.
I think they said, I'm sure they said like 19. Did they say? I would, because at the beginning I thought they were talking about like a war from our time. Like I don't know if it was First or Second World War. It was, but that was what I thought in the beginning. And then as I kept listening, I realized that they're talking about this magical war and not like World War II or something. So but I think maybe it was even World War I was the time period, because I'm sure I remember seeing the year 9 or hearing the year 1914 and thinking, oh, it must be, that's why they're talking about the war. And then I was like, hang on, they're talking about like the black stuff all in the river and everything. And I'm like, this is not the same thing. So yeah, like I was like, I thought that was kind of what I had in my head was early 1900s, but I don't know whether I just got that from nowhere or whether that's actually what it was.
We're also talking about intercontinental travel being pretty much impossible as well. And I didn't know if that was because of the fallout from the war or the fact that, you know, Paris is nothing but in a pretty much its own pocket universe at this point because everything else is all destroyed. I thought actually it was pretty well done that you couldn't really pin it down to a time period because it was so isolated. The world that the Volomorn was so isolated from the rest of the world that it pretty much didn't matter. I don't know. Also, the introductory scene, I got the idea that everything was so post-apocalyptic that you wouldn't want to walk the streets. So.
Yeah.
And obviously they have working cars, so to some extent.
Yeah. That first scene actually was really good, and I was kind of had high expectations after that. You know, the scene where he was like, they found the fallen, and it was an interesting first little bit where it was from her perspective as she was falling, and then he was like with the gang and they found the body and they were like, we're going to take bits of it because it makes angel dust and whatever the, you know, power comes from their bodies and stuff. I thought that was really an interesting scene. But I just need to be able to connect to a character, and I don't need them to be, I just need to care about a character. Like, even if I hate them, at least I care about them. Like, I just didn't care about any of the characters, and half the time I didn't, well, for the first little bit, I was so confused about who was who in all the house, especially the two house leaders. I was like, which house are you from again? And which one was, I kept getting confused about which one was the girlfriend of I've forgotten all their names. The house leader. One of them was the girlfriend and the other one was the one that was.
So Celine is the leader of the House Silver Spires and Emmanuel is her girlfriend.
And then who was the other one that was the one that was addicted to the angel dust? Who was that? That was
Madeline.
That was the two I kept getting mixed up, was Emmanuel and Madeline at the beginning. Towards the end I was better, but like at the beginning I'm like, which one did you, Yeah. And again, I wasn't sure if that was just because I kept tuning out, well, in the audiobook, and I don't know. So, yeah.
I was curious to know whether you thought that Philippe was supposed to be like the character you connected to.
I was closest to connecting to him than anybody, and if he had probably had more going on, he didn't really do very much. The thing that I found most interesting was when they went down to the dragons, like under the river, and like that whole scene was really interesting, and I would have liked more of that, but I don't know, I just mostly was confused the whole time. And
that bit was awesome. It just felt like it's like you've got this stale universe where everyone's pretty much been fighting the same war for hundreds of years, and then it's like, oh look, dragons that are in the river, cool.
Yeah.
Also, they're kind of like, sure, they're like crucifying people to get them to talk to their dead ancestors, but hey, everyone's got their thing.
Well, and I thought it was interesting that they were connected with the river and that they were going all funny because the river was polluted and everything. I thought that part was quite interesting. But it did have this like little sparks of bits where I was like, oh, this bit's interesting, and then I'll get bored again. Like, so, yeah. And the whole bit with Morningstar, I was like, felt like that was built up, and then he kind of shows up and it's like, does nothing.
Yeah, that was really disappointing.
You know who he's supposed to be. Generally, he's one of the biggies in any other story over here, and there's enough about him. Yeah, I feel like if she didn't want us to go, okay, this is what we need to focus on, she should have played him down a lot more. But everyone's thinking about him. Everyone's like, and the character that I remember following the most was constantly thinking, oh, I wonder if he's really meant like as scary as I'm thinking he is. Like, it was all of this thinking about him and being taken up in her headspace. But then didn't go anywhere too much after that.
It's also the bit where like everyone's like, no way did Morningstar screw someone over, and I'm like, okay,
did not see this coming.
How could you have possibly thought that would be a thing? Wait, no, this is just after the fall, so I guess you didn't see it coming.
Also,
sorry, go on,
Kirsten. You go. No, you go.
I was just going to say, like, I thought that in some respects that it illustrated that cult of personality really well, because, everyone is so taken in by this guy, thinks he's so charming, and, and when he's gone, what he has built sort of crumbles because it hasn't got the force of his personality there keeping it going. So in that sense, I thought it was quite interesting. And like, I did like that in many respects, you don't really see the full him ever on screen. Like, you see like little bits here and there, but you don't really get to see him. And in that sense, it was kind of like what horror films do really effectively, like good horror films do effectively with their monsters. Like, you never, like Alien, you never really see it clearly, and that's what makes it more scary. But yeah, in the end, it was wasted.
Yeah, like you could have built him up as a real, and it was just like, I'm gonna send him off to go and die, and he's gonna go, okay, and but the thing talking about characters that were interesting, the one character that I did find really interesting that I was wanting, like, connecting to was the one that was the shadow, the ghost woman,
Nightingale.
Yeah, I was like, I'm on her side. I get why she's mad. She can like destroy this whole place, and I don't care about any of the people because she's got a good reason to be so mad. So, yeah.
I also found, in some respects, I felt the book was too long, like by about 100 pages. I got, about 3/4 of the way through, and Asmodeus is like resurrecting Morningstar, and I'm like, yep, is there just a lot of back matter here, or because like it is the first book in a trilogy, I thought that would be a really awesome cliffhanger to end on, and like, yeah, it was kind of running out of time to wrap things up, but in that last quarter they just jammed in twist after twist. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I actually felt like it was building to a climax, and it kind of got there, and then it was like, I thought, okay, well, this is going to be the end of the book. And then I looked on the audiobook how long it had to go, and I was like, what? Why is there so much left to go? This seems to be like the ending part, you know, but no, it wasn't.
I reckon it was one book, and as she was working on it, her editor was like, we want it longer. We think we can make this into a trilogy. And so she ended up having to throw in stuff that wasn't necessarily planned to be able to extend
It's
out.
possible. Like I feel like where the book actually ends up ending is kind of works all right, because there's enough resolution for it to be satisfying. You don't have to read the rest. Yeah, but it would have made a really excellent cliffhanger to end it like 100 pages earlier. So I don't know.
Although that is interesting,
It's
because I think that's about when I decided I wasn't going to read it anymore. It was about 3/4 of the way through the audiobook. So
yeah, look, like publishing is in a really interesting place, and has been for the last few years. Like they want you to write a first novel that could stand alone, or it could be the first in a trilogy. So like
thanks, guys.
so they hedge their bets, like, and that's the way it's been for a few years. So I can see that playing out here in some respects. Like having a more definitive cliffhanger would have been an excellent place to leave it, but having it all wrapped up and so that if it didn't sell well, they could just be like, nah, let's not worry about it.
Yeah.
Part of it felt a little bit like Quicksilver by Neil Stephenson, where it's like the first chapter really dragged me in, and then it's like, then he's like, I really need people to have a strong background in 17th century European politics to understand where I'm coming from. And that was the rest of the book. It kind of felt like that. It was like they were trying to build characters and actually not have them just be, I mean, it started a bit that way, but they were trying to actually have backstory for the characters and have motivations for them. And that was pretty hard, but I think that really trying to build that into a point actually did just detract from the story after a while. Like there was probably only so many times I needed to hear about the grudge that a previous student of Morningstar's must have had to create this mirror. Like after the first 8 or 9 times, I thought that maybe I really could just do with actually moving the story forward a bit more rather than hammering it in.
Speaking of like comparable titles, one that really played on my mind was The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi, which is like the YA version in a way. It's like an alternate history Paris, where there are houses or like families, you know, intrigue and whatnot. And the main character is like, I think he's a person of color anyway, who has inherited like a broken house basically, and is trying to reclaim his inheritance and take his place amongst the houses. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like this book, so The House of Shattered Wings meets like Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. And kind of touches on the colonial themes that are kind of brought up in The House of Shattered Wings here. Did you guys think that it worked all right, like the exploration of that particular theme?
Well, I could see that, like, especially now that you pointed out, yeah, because I guess that sort of fits into that court intrigue, because really this is true. The feeling that I was getting was very much like French colonial court intrigue. However, that is not how I was envisioning anything. I really saw Blade when I was listening to this for whatever reason. Like I was seeing I don't know why, but yeah. So yeah, I would say that in a lot of ways, although were there Was there a lot of obvious differentiation between characters aside from gender and obvious alignment? I don't necessarily remember much of that beyond that. So I don't know. I'm not sure how obvious any other parallels might have been, and that might be part why I didn't pick up on it. I don't know. But
well, obviously Philippe is from Vietnam, so he's like the main character who's looking at this through like a colonial lens, like having been, you know, kidnapped from his home country and brought over here and kind of abandoned. He's the one kind of looking at this at the system that's governing Paris and seeing how kind of sick and broken it is. The others not so much. Like I know Emmanuel was supposed to be like present as black, but isn't, like, is a fallen, so isn't really culturally black, which I mean, I guess is an interesting choice. And she's obviously invested in like the system as it is, and the book like comments specifically on that, like as long as good people like her and some of the others like invest into houses, like the system can never, like, will struggle to be brought down, if that makes sense. So yeah, commenting on like systemic oppression and that sort of thing. But seems like it didn't resonate for you guys all that much.
No, but that also could be just because a lot of it seemed to just, I couldn't grasp on, like really grasp on and hold on to a lot of what was going on.
Yeah, I think Philippe's story was probably the one that resonated with me most, was but I just felt like a lot of it was just these two houses against each other, and I didn't care about either of them. And so I didn't really get enough of, like, he was kind of just like, I'm sick of this shit, leave me alone, which totally get that. But I wanted, like, I think I wanted more from his perspective. And then I thought the relationship with him and, was it Isabel?
That's right.
Was really interesting, but we didn't get enough of that. Like, because I was like, at the beginning, I'm like, bullshit that she's just like, I'm going to be, like, I get that, like, there was this blood connection or whatever, because he was drinking her blood or whatever the hell he did, eating her fingers, I don't remember. But, like, she's just like, okay, I'm going to be latching onto you as a friend. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I'd be doing that in your place, but radio. I thought it was an interesting relationship. I mean, maybe that was what was missing for me, is I don't need romance necessarily, but I really like books with interesting relationships between the characters. Like, I really love a book with good friendships in it. And I didn't get any of that in this book at all. Like, I didn't really feel like any of the characters really, they connected with each other. Even the ones that were kind of supposed to be fighting each other, I didn't get like I don't know, I didn't really feel like that was even a connection. It was just kind of like, we're fighting each other because we've always fought each other, because these houses have always fought each other, and it's these old grudges that nobody really knows. Like, I didn't get the character interaction that I would have liked, and maybe that was what the problem was more than anything. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of like on purpose in a way. Like it's trying to show that all the characters are isolated. So like even Celine and Emmanuel, they're not really, like, you don't really see them connect ever.
Yeah, like if you hadn't been told on the page that they were a couple, you wouldn't have guessed that from their interactions with each other.
Well, it is the aristocracy. And you literally cannot have any class movement because, you can't fall.
But that's not really the issue here, because class here is not like equivalent, I don't think.
It's more like power, I suppose, but like actual, not like actual amount of like magical power. But I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to put my finger on what didn't quite work for me with this book, but it didn't quite work for me.
I think I would really love to, now that I've listened to at least this much, hear us like read some short stories set in this universe. Like, I think that would work really well. Like, just given this background, they could do so much with it. But the actual book itself didn't drive a story
quite a few
itself.
short stories that you can delve into.
Are there?
Any of them about the dragons? I really
Uh,
liked that.
I would have to check. I don't know off the top of my head.
That is actually pretty fantastic.
The author herself identifies as Vietnamese French, so she's drawing on elements of her own culture in depicting the dragons and things. Although she, I think, was born in America, but she's lived mostly in Paris.
Which, to be honest, like reading when I read that about her, because I was looking up her bio before I came in tonight, and I was thinking that in some ways explains the way some of the relationships are depicted, because from what I remember when I was doing my French literature courses in Angers, particularly around the romanticism era, it's like, it's very much, you have French stories that are very hot and saucy and romantic, and that very stereotypical ooh la la thing, and then you have that is not it, and you would have no idea that like people were together and connected in any way other than they were in a room together and breathing the same air, like even though maybe they were married. And because that's like, it's like, if the thing seems to be that if that author was going to write about something, they were all in on that one thing they were writing about, and they didn't flesh out anything else. So that might be partially why some of the relationships are depicted the way that they are, that's just culturally what she grew up reading, and so therefore that's kind of how that's what's influenced her as well.
I mean, she certainly seems capable of writing like more conventional romance when she wants to. As Mel said, some of her earlier stuff seemed to be more in that field, and her most recent release is a sapphic romance. So is there any? Sorry, go ahead, David.
Just from a really shallow point of view, just if we take it back to the on a very literal meaning, someone is basically saying Paris is hell. Like, because I was kept on looking for the myth of like the tie into the biblical myths, because there's literally fallen angels, and Morningstar literally came first and had all this charisma and stuff, and it's like, well, okay, so Paris is hell, and I'm keeping on waiting for what's happening next. But it turned out that the whole book is not actually heading in that direction, which is fine. But yeah, that bit I just kept on coming back and haunting me. One last thing though, is I do really appreciate that the whole book was not front to back, start to end, evisceration of angels. That was pretty cool.
Thankfully. I'm not sure I'd have been able to read it if it was. Was there anything else that we wanted to bring up?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Sounds like that is it for tonight. So thank you everyone for joining us. Our book for next month is Dreamer's Pool by Juliette Marillier, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.